Okay, thank you very much. So this paper's originally built around me wondering, because I'm a historian originally, why two seminal papers haven't had the influence that they've had in HCI. One, many people are aware of, at least they're aware of the idea of wicked problems. And this was a paper written by people in planning, and often planners have generally been way ahead of people in HCI because they've been dealing very publicly with problems of human involvement, participation and impact. But you do hear wicked problem bandied around, particularly from people in critical design and speculative design, and idealistic young designers are going to go around and solve wicked problems. The problem is you can't solve a wicked problem, because the point about a wicked problem is you don't know what the problem is till you've accepted the solution. So in fact what you actually do is problem a wicked solution, that once you've got the solution you know what the problem is. So that's got about 10,000 citations. Another paper that's less well known in HCI but often mentioned in the Agile community is a paper by Takeuchi and Nonika, and it was the sort of short Harvard Business Review version that Jeff Sutherland picked on for the idea of Scrum, because they say, if you're looking at what's happening in Japanese consumer product organizations, all the successful ones, it's not a linear relay anymore, stage. It's more people running around a Scrum, and Jeff Sutherland said, oh great, a Scrum. They had 6 other principles, one was self-organizing teams, the other 5 just disappear from the Agile literature. One is subtle managerial control, but that one didn't make it through. The book itself is got 39,000. So why haven't these had the influence? Because we still have linear stages, and we still have to think that you've got to define the problem, know who the users are, know what matters to them before you're allowed to do any designing. They both blame NASA for this. Most of our project management comes from NASA, an organization with an unlimited budget and unlimited time, who came up with a methodology for delivering on time and on budget. So there's an irony there. What they both have in common is saying that good design work is not linear, that problems and solutions co-evolve, and that the solution is always completed before the problem is fully understood, and that concurrent beats linear. Iteration does not get you anywhere there, because iteration is just doing stages in the same order, at best you can jump them. It's not wholly rational, because the funny thing about creative design and not knowing what you're doing is you can't plan. So planning everything in advance goes against, you can't have your cake and eat it. And certainly if you look at that, the new product design paper, the heart of that is multi-learning, creative learning, multidisciplinary learning, being at the heart of the product development process, not bureaucratic planning. And you don't have implications for design, you have to make connections, and they're hard-won integrations. You don't know what's going to happen, you don't know when things are going to come together, but you damn well know when they do. And the best thing to do is to not try and idealize anything here. And all empirical studies of design, and it doesn't matter how hard the engineering design is, circuit design, elevator design, all empirical studies of design support this, that you have concurrent evolution of the problem and solution space. And that truly creative design is always wicked or actually wild, because Rittel and Weber talk about tame problems, and they say that wicked is the opposite of tame. Well, no, the opposite of tame is wild. The problem with all the standardized process, the should processes, they actually normalize the abnormal. They ignore the realities as is, and they impose a rationalization on design work that actually doesn't exist. So here's the should process. It's a classic engineering design process. HCI colonized 2 stages of it and can do sod all about the other 2. So they go where the human scientists have got things to do. They can study contexts of use, they can evaluate things, but they don't really know how to engineer requirements, and there's certainly none of the methods used in interaction design come from HCI. They come from interaction design. So there's only 2 stages hospitable to HCI. So how have we ended up in a situation where we have a very strong understanding of how creative design work works, and why haven't these papers had the influence within HCI? I mean, we really should be getting riled. So it's a rational thing, that if you haven't defined the problem, then you can't derive requirements, and only then can you select designs, implement them, verify and validate them. It's this idealized rationality, and that problems in reality don't often precede solutions, and they may not precede them at all. That the standard engineering design methodology is true for tame problems, but often these problems are so tame that you really wonder whether they are tame, whether they're problems at all, or just like asking someone to put a fence up. And they're easily verified, and they're already validated because you know what the problem is. So you've got this linearity that you have to have understanding, fully understand all of the problem, whatever that means, before you start on solutions. And if you look at any engineering design textbook, you look at any science fair briefs online for American science fairs, project management tools. So we get riled from this, rational, idealized, linear engineering design. And the problem we've got here is that as long as you're speaking with the enemy, you're not going to escape their language. So, you know, we've understood this with the likes of Frantz Fanon and post-colonialism, is that if you speak a language, you take on a world, a culture, and that mastery of a language affords remarkable power. So what I'm arguing is that we have to take back language and stop using the language of the enemy. So there's two big problems with wicked problems. One, they're not wicked, they're wild, and two, they're not problems. But otherwise, it's all okay. So the problem with Rittel and Weber is they never escaped this riled discourse, and their thinking remained colonized. And what's happened is that by using that word problem and wicked problem, it maintains and reproduces unrealistic, harmful norms. So basically, we've got some demolition to work. We need to get rid of, we've got 8 crimes here, and of course we should all be standing up against 8 crimes. So we've got problems which impose rationality. We've got requirements that are generally expressed in the solution space, not the problem space. We've got a solution, but a solution to what? And I think that very much resonates with the first talk today. We have stages and phases to impose linearity. We have this dreaded implications for design, which means implications for any design that no one's even thought of yet and never may do, but we want to know what they are. That assumes rationality. We have these centers that allows us to colonize the hospitable linear stages. So UCD colonizes problem analysis. It colonizes verification and validation. It doesn't colonize the other ones, so there is no D in UCD. Validity, at the end of it, again, rational linearity mirroring the scientific method as seen in school science fairs. And the only get out of jail card is iteration, that when you get to the end and find it's not right, you're allowed to go around again. It's a bit like Monopoly, you know. And, you know, I'm just taking these 8 words first. There's a load of others that we need to get on top of, like rigorous, reliable, systematic, guaranteed, complete, objective, disciplined, planned, repeatable, well-managed, evidence-based, fully informed, give me the money. And, you know, by the time you've got all those on your side, who needs creativity? Okay, so let's delete the first 3 words and replace them with design arenas, which are either artifacts, and I'll tell you what they are, or memoranda. These are not linear, they're not pre-rationalized, and no one is the center. There's no king of the hill. So there's a great book by John Heskett, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. It was called Toothpicks and Logos, and it was reissued as the very short introduction to design. And like many sensible people, John says what is the definition of design, and then spends a page saying this is a pointless exercise, but then says design outcomes are things we can say things about. You know, designing makes choices on how ends can be achieved, for whose advantage. It's not just about initial decisions or concepts, it's about how they're implemented, how we evaluate them, and what we're evaluating as benefit here. So we've got means, ends, beneficiaries, and evaluations in there. And I call these 4 design arenas. And rather than having stages, what design work does at different points is have a different balance of work in different design arenas. So let's just start playing. Means and ends get people very confused. So let's change means to artifacts and ends to purpose. And that again connects with the first 2 talks today. And that's pretty intelligible, which, you know, I'm going to have to start wrecking. So let's change beneficiaries to any fisheries, because sometimes for design crime, you sometimes deliberately design against people, and a lot of the time you accidentally design against people. And again, you know, in the first talk, you can't claim you've done good until you've done good. I mean, if you want one take-home message today from this session, that is it. You know, don't say you're going to deliver benefits. Tell us when you have delivered them. And the fact is in design is that things that you have beneficiaries and you have maleficiaries. You have people to whom harm is done, either deliberately or accidentally. The problem with artifacts is in the bulk of the time in design, you're not working in the final artifact stage. And in design research, you may never get to a final artifact form. So what you're actually dealing with are antifacts. So video envisionment, the use of drama and performance, scenarios, video scenarios, lo-fi prototypes, hi-fi prototypes, Wizard of Oz. Antifacts gives you one word to cover all the stuff that isn't stuff. And therefore, you then need a word to stick it all together, so that's what artifacts are. It's like Ms versus Mrs. and Ms. So an artifact is an antifact or an artifact. So these are the design arenas, and you don't need problems or solutions. And then finally, just to get rid of these stupid centers and the kings of the hill, the only thing that design ever does in all its variations is produce some sort of artifact. Everything else is a memoranda. It's something to be borne in mind. And different design practices have a different balance between evaluation, purpose, and beneficiaries. So we've got to get rid of the other words. So we get rid of stage and plan with episodes. We get rid of implications for any design, the crystal ball of user research to integrations for this artifact. You can only have implications for this design. You've got to know what the damn design is before you start talking about implications, which is why you have to work concurrently on the problem and the solution. Get rid of centers, you've got foci, so you can have design-led, strategy-driven, human-centered, evaluation-based, and none of them inherently bad, all good. So we're seeing in the agile space with hybrids of agile and design thinking that lean UX is both design-led and evaluation-based. Google Venture sprints are very much strategy-driven, and they're both initial moves, but by no means complete moves away from RILED. Get rid of validity and think instead of an Axiofact, and I'll come back to what that is in a minute. And again, get rid of iterated sequential processes and think in terms of balanced concurrent dramas. So just to skip to this, I mean, normally you have a choice between a structured process or a squiggly line. So this is work that Jenny George wrote up for her PhD last year, where she tracked right through a design research project the relative balance in the different design arenas. So you can see here that the whole thing's a drama. There are scenes within that, there are episodes, and in different scenes you can have a single focus or you can have multiple foci. What she also did reflectively at the end of each episode was look at the relative balance between the design arenas and the connections between them that had been made explicitly. So that was called a most abstract design situation. The other one's a proportional one. I've used this in teaching. So at Eindhoven, last year, this is a student's comment, just very quickly. You called, how dare you, she was a computer science, how dare you call 4 circles a framework? You know, that's not hard enough. But she basically said, to cut through the quote, suddenly the chaos of the creative work suddenly clears up. And in a 1-week module, the students they were the doctoral professional doctorate students at Eindhoven, they found that just 4 little circles each day is a good way of tracking how your work's going. So there's the chaos of creative work. I mean, the squiggly lines, when they're drawn, are never squiggly enough. Get rid of implications. Listen to real designers like Charles and Ray Eames. Everything eventually connects, people, ideas, objects. The quality of connections is the key to quality per se. Or, you know, in my terms of design arenas, everything eventually connects, beneficiaries, purpose, artifacts, and it's the quality of integrations that the key to quality per se. Studies of designers show time and time again that there are these moments in design when everything comes together. It's very emotional, it's very cathartic, and designers just know that they finally, after a long struggle and really doubting whether they're going to get anywhere, finally do get there. And then the final thing to get rid of is validity. So what's an Axiofact? An Axiofact is an artifact, so it works for both practice and research. Thank you. So in practice, it will always be an artifact, but in research, it doesn't, you know, we're just looking at Bill in the corner, pillow feather shaker, that was all conceptual design. There was no artifact there, it was just possibilities of artifacts, and this is very common in architecture as well. And then basically you connect artifacts in some way in a memoranda, and that's it. And it is the reflective, critical reflections that make these connections that actually is the basis for the best design practice and for the best design research. So what's an axiofact? Axiology is the study of value. It's worth that has been made by reflectively connecting artifacts in conversations with memoranda. So picking up on Schoen there, and also Forrester on the deliberative practitioner. But it is about thinking through, about reflecting, about reasoning, about deliberation. It's not about rational, logical implications for design. So just wrapping up, this is the Janus Face, and it's the Janus Face that Latour used to describe the science world, that there is ready-made science, the world of certainties, of method, of guarantees, and there's science in the making. And we see the same, that RILED is ready-made design. And this is all a vocabulary of approaches and methods that deliver certainties and guarantees. And therefore, on the other side, you see design in the making, which does require a completely different vocabulary. It's the only way to get away from the traps of the RILED discourse. So it's not a new process, it's a new drama through this new vocabulary. So I'm introducing a new term. Let's have some practical correctness. Let's have some realism about process. Let's have normal norms rather than abnormal ones. That the key driver is excellence of outcomes, not how you got there. For practice, for design research, some level of credible critical reflection is required. Avoiding pre-staged project plans, so it's act, record, reflect, connect, continue. And for those of you who are really interested, I've got an all-day course together where you will walk out the door fully skilled in this. So. Anyone got any questions? Course C09, very good value.
Hi.
Hi, Chris.
Yeah. Thank you for that flurry on terminology.
Yeah.
One term that was notably absent from
Yeah.
all of your slides was knowing or knowledge.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, do we need to know, is knowing bad? Or how does that fit in there?
Well, you have knowledge in every single design arena. So the sort of thing that you would track in design work is the stuff that you've decided is relevant at each stage. So, yeah. But the thing is, if you actually look at a low level at design work, information, that's only one resource function. So the resources and approaches you pull together in design work, some of it's informative, but the stuff that really moves design on are the questions and the ideas. So a lot of the effort that goes into building these reference works on, how hard to press a button, and then people complain that designers don't use them, is because, in fact, if there's any major skill in design, it's asking the right question at the right time. So, in fact, ignorance is actually more important to design. And, Socrates style, knowing your ignorance. And again, if you look at transcripts of design work, it is, there are some people who are great at asking the right question at the right time. So course knowledge is important, but if you've got a multidisciplinary team who are expert and skilled in what they're doing, you don't need to worry about that. It comes as a given.
And it will become apparent, or is it something that manifests itself in these arenas?
It surfaces at the thing is you've got different arenas. The knowledge required to do evaluation work is very different to the knowledge required to express purpose. I mean, that's an axiological space, and the vocabulary there is very different to evaluation, although it's related to, but once you start measuring things or assessing things, your language is different. And the same with the language that we use to describe people, who matters and what matters about them. That's what you've got in the beneficiary space. But then the artifact space is a craft space. And that's something that, a lot, certainly early HCI was very contemptuous as, how do you know that's the right way to do a form? How do you know whether that icon's good enough? Well, actually, because I've been doing this job for 20 years and I'm good. And you don't know, if you look at a lot of early comparison work in HCI, you had some terrible experiments comparing one bit of rubbish with another that no professional designer would ever have turned out. So that's the importance of knowledge. You should know what you're doing. Simple but hard. Easy to say, hard to do. Okay, thank you.